when we're just trying to endure the struggle, we're not really getting anywhere. And it's going to be harder for us. But if we can embrace whatever circumstance you're in and be present each and every day with it, because if you lean into it, you're leaning into God. And if you're leaning into God, then maybe He will be able to show you the path to take.
Hey, I'm Jody.
And I'm Chris.
And we are Loving the Outcome. Welcome to our podcast.
We're a husband and wife who rock out together.
We're parents of Milo and Ziggy.
And we're following Jesus as best we can.
Our story began in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we fell in love, got married, and decided to sell everything and travel in our Jetta, selling CDs out of the trunk of our car.
The road led us to Nashville, where we signed a record deal, started our family, and now the four of us travel together in our minibus, White Neptune.
I know, crazy, right? Our life is a road trip.
And we want to invite you into it.
So come along for the ride as we chat with some of our favorite people about family, spirituality, wellness,
and of course, music.
Come on, let's go.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Today I got to have a Zoom chat with my new friend, former Bachelorette season number 9, Desiree Siegfried. This woman is on a journey, and it's so cool talking to people that are pursuing God, pursuing growth, and pursuing living a life of purpose, which is what she is all about. I wanted to talk to her all about her season as a Bachelorette because I can't really even imagine publicly learning lessons about yourself, about love, and actually finding your husband, who she is with, Chris. He seems like an awesome guy, all on public television for the whole world to have opinions about. So I wanted to hear how that affected her, if it caused her any fear, anxiety, or identity issues, really. So we get into all of that. She's really honest about the journey of the show and the journey of her life and where she's at right now as a mom of 2 boys and as a wife and just as a woman who is getting to know God more intimately and herself more intimately in the process. So I think every woman in the world, and guys, I think you'll enjoy this episode too, but especially women who are dealing with identity issues, this is a really, really great episode to get into. So make sure you check out her podcast, Heart of Purpose podcast, where she shares all her life lessons. I got to be a guest on that show. It was such a blast. It was a really great combo. So I think you're going to love this episode. And like always, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends and drop me a comment. Let us know if you're enjoying it. And we do worship Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, because we cannot be on the road right now. We thought that'd be such a cool way to keep connecting with you. So join us on Wednesdays. I'm also doing Devos Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Just me. Sometimes Chris joins for a song. Sometimes my kids join for whatever they want to join for. It's always pretty off the cuff, but it's a blast doing Devos with you guys on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. I'm praying and hoping that if we all keep wearing our masks and if coronavirus continues to dwindle, that we will be able to meet you guys on the road. We just announced a tour that we're doing with our friends, Building 429 and Dan Bremnes, and we're going to be hitting the road all together, Lord willing, in September. The dates are announced on our website. Tickets aren't for sale just yet, but make sure you take a look at the tour routing and see if we're coming to a city near you. Love you guys. Thanks for all your support and love. This season's crazy and it's really easy to get overwhelmed, but we're hoping this podcast just helps you focus on today, helps you focus on God in your everyday moments, and gives a little more purpose to your steps. So let's dive in. Hey, Desiree, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much for having me.
So how is today? How are you doing?
Today is great. Like we mentioned, it's on a day-to-day basis.
It is. It's so day to day right now. Have you had, when you look back, have you had like, oh yeah, like that week felt great? And were you able to identify why it was great?
Oh, that's a really good question. Actually, I would say in the beginning of, you know how the phases of quarantine, like the different stages are true, like in the beginning, you're like, okay, I could do this. I got this. We're going to do so much with the kids. We're going to, I have all these plans. And then it kind of starts to dwindle and you're like, you get busy, you get distracted. I would say the good weeks are when I'm intentional with the kids.
Mm.
Yeah. Cause I remember in the beginning,
too.
yeah, I remember in the beginning, Asher's 3.5 and he goes to school, but with quarantine, he was home. And so I remember the first few weeks were just so much fun because the boys were, I have a 1.5-year-old too, and the boys were just bonding so much and they were playing so much. And I was like creative and I'm like, we're going to do this and this. And
Yeah.
oh yeah, I guess now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that was a good week. But then work happens and life happens. So
And you're like, we're still in this. This isn't
yeah,
a short little thing. This is still going.
yeah, it gets a little draining.
It does. It's funny that you say that though, because Chris and I try, like, we're both married to Chris's. So
Yeah, I know. I love that.
it's Chris's. And by the way, I should stop. Okay, so I'm talking to Desiree, and I'm going to do a really awesome intro, Desiree. It's going to sound awesome with all
I
the.
love it.
But I just wanted to jump in because, like, I talked to you once on your podcast. Now I feel like we're best friends. So I'm
I
like,
know, same.
let's just hang out. But I think a lot of people probably know you originally from The Bachelorette, right?
Yes, most people know me from Bachelor, Bachelorette, if you were watching it back in 2013.
Yeah, so that was season 9?
Season 9, yes.
9, okay. And I'm embarrassed to say this. I didn't really watch The Bachelorette.
That's great.
But
I love that.
I recognized your face, like when you first asked me, and I was like, why does her name sound familiar? And so I looked you up. I follow along with your life, and it's been so cool to see from 2013 Bachelorette to the you right now. And just
completely different.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of want to, if you're okay with it, because I want to get back to talking about intentionality with your kids. But I feel like before we skip ahead to that, let's back up and talk about the you in 2013 on The Bachelorette. And just walk us through, if you're not sick of talking about it, I would love to know the journey from that point.
Oh, goodness. What a journey. I know. I feel like so much of my journey began prior to it, like the really testimony of like when I was really seeking God and I was broke as a joke in LA and just trying to make ends meet. But I was spending, a good year of just seeking God and seeking his life for me because I was confused as to what my next step should be. I was working in a bridal store and barely making ends meet, having to borrow money just to like get gas or groceries. And it was just hard to know, like, oh, these dreams I have of being a designer are just never going to happen. Or these dreams of like meeting my husband are never going to happen because I felt like I didn't have the resources or anything. But, God opened that door.
You, before even Bachelorette, you were wanting to be a designer. That was the dream. That was the goal.
Oh, yes. That was the goal. Ever since I was 16, I knew that I wanted to go to design school and that I wanted to design dresses. So that was always the goal. But living in California, I lived in Orange County most of the time. And it was just a very difficult time to stay focused in that, or I guess even just saving money, because financially living on my own and not necessarily having a family that could help, it was difficult. Having to pay back student loans, as I'm sure everyone knows.
Yeah, totally.
It was a hassle. And then also just living in the lifestyle that I was around. I would say back then I thought, oh, I'm still Christian. I pray. I believe in God. But I was also pushing God away because I wanted to live this lifestyle of, drinking, partying, and just making bad decisions. But yeah, and so
and I want to associate myself with you, but I need to do these things.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, it's so hypocritical too, you know, when you're like, oh, I'm still a great Christian. I just like to, you know, get boozy and make bad decisions with my body. You know, it's like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
it's so bad. But I did start to feel convicted of that lifestyle and convicted of my choices. And after a breakup is when I was like, it was almost as if like God was getting rid of all the bad fruit in my life
Mm.
and was renewing me to like produce good fruit.
Mm.
And I always felt deep down like there's something big to happen. Like I just felt it. And I felt it ever since like high school. And I guess maybe I was thinking that would be towards like design or I'm going to be successful because I just felt like, I don't know, I was driven, motivated, and
Yeah.
I always felt like there was something bigger to come. But I think that's also just walking by faith. I think
Mm.
throughout life, you know, my parents and stuff, they walked by faith and I just witnessed that. And I think deep down, I just felt like, wow, like, you know, walking by faith, you always believe that something better is going to come when you are walking by faith. And so I just always believed that even when I was struggling. And
Mm.
yeah, and so fast forward to LA, and I never watched a season of the show before, but
Mm.
my roommate had it on and I was like, oh, that looks super easy. Obviously, I knew the concept. I had watched like a few here and there, but I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that looks pretty easy. little did I little did I know. And so I signed up and it just happened pretty quickly. I still didn't take it seriously though. I was like, that's not really going to happen for me. And then
Right.
it just kept happening. And but I also let it be God's thing and not my thing. So I was praying like, if the door opens, then, you know, this will be for you and I'll give you the glory. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then I'll just go about my life and you have something else for me.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. And during this time too, I always mention this because I was praying for, you know, I really did want to meet a good man, but I also stopped praying for that man to just show up. And I started praying for my future husband's heart and really like preparing his heart for me because I had such bad previous experience with men that weren't ready.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Crazy. I love it. So you're from Colorado, is that right?
Yeah, well, yes. From 1 to 8, I was in Indiana, but I
Okay.
grew up in Denver.
Okay. So you went to LA to chase your dreams. That was like an intentional move for you. You didn't necessarily have it all planned out and perfect, but you were ambitious and motivated and you knew you were destined for big things and you just were like, let's do this.
Yeah, I had never been to California before in my life.
Mhm.
But I had this weird like obsession with like palm trees and the beach
Yeah.
and like it was just calling me. I was like, the mountains are beautiful, but I didn't live in the mountains. I was like in Denver and it's too cold for me. So I just felt a calling to go to California and I didn't really know where, but ended up in Orange County because the Fashion Institute had a campus there. And so
Yeah.
that's where my journey began.
So you went to school there too?
Yeah, so I went to school there and then you only go to the Orange County campus for a year and then you go to the LA campus. So,
Okay.
but I only lived in Orange County during that time until I moved.
So you applied to the Bachelorette, and then are you still in school or are you finished school at this point?
Oh no, I was way done. Yeah. Since it was a design school, I finished at like 20, you know, age 20, because it was just a 2 year.
Yeah, and you're just kind of like, okay, what next? Maybe this could be your what next.
What next? Yeah. So I did a brief go back to Colorado after school because I had a boyfriend and I didn't have any money. So
Yeah.
but then during that year I realized like I don't belong in Denver and just I had to go back to California. So when I went back to California, that's when I ended up in Newport Beach and I did pursue my dream still. But in order to like make ends meet, I had to also waitress. So I would waitress and also I got a job working for a plus size women's clothing company, which was amazing. And I got to learn so much in design and
Yeah.
really that's where a lot of my like experience comes from.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm getting a picture. So then you apply for this show, you get on the show, you're like, whatever. Show.
Yeah, I was such a skeptic.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
I,
Such a skeptic.
yeah, the door opened. Okay, God, let's give this a shot. But then you be like, you're starring in this show?
Well, so first you have to go on The Bachelor. So I was
You have to go
one,
on The Bachelor first?
yeah, so I was one of 25 girls, and I made it to like top 4 or whatever.
I'm so embarrassed.
And
I should have known that. I only know you as Bachelorette.
oh no, it's great. No, it's okay. But yeah, I had to start as the Bachelor, and I mean not as the Bachelor, but
Like on it.
on the Bachelor.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult. Well, at first I was just like skeptic of it, but Sean was the Bachelor and he was like a Christian. So I'm like, oh wow, maybe this is meant to be. Like maybe this is why God opened the door, because I had never dated a Christian before in my life. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that could be a possibility. You know, he maybe not like my type, but he's Christian and we share that faith. And so I gave it a shot and we hit it off, and it continued to progress. But then in that setting, it just isn't good for me, because that setting was also what I had been in previous relationships, where like you're constantly seeking validation.
Hmm.
But in that setting, you have to, because the Bachelor can't just be like, okay, show's done. Like, will you marry me?
Wow.
And so it was difficult. I had a lot of ups and downs of like questioning if I should be there, questioning if I do like him, or if I'm just getting involved with like the show aspect of it, and questioning if he even liked me, because, you know, there was no affirmation. And I really struggled with like finding an answer, you know, like praying and being like, God, like, I have no idea. And I never really got a clear answer, but I was also super distracted with everything that's going on. And it didn't work out for me. And I was surprised at the end when I did get sent home. But I also, I guess, wasn't that bummed, you know, like because I was still like, okay, well, something better is to come. Like, I don't know. That's just how I lived my life. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so I went home, and then, you know, they did eventually decide to choose me as the Bachelorette, which was another surprise. And
Wow.
that's when I met my husband, though. So,
I know. I think that's really romantic. I mean, we're just
oh,
seeing little tiny snippets of your story, but I love that you met him and you guys are together and you built this beautiful family and you're building your dream together. Like that's it suits, I feel like, you as a dress designer and a wedding dress designer, and you're the Bachelorette and you meet your husband. But I'm
yeah.
sure it hasn't all been roses and perfect.
No, not at all. Not in the sense of the show and how that has like left a lot of like, you know, just that was a struggle in itself, because since you didn't watch, I'll just, you know, some people didn't watch and
No,
know what happened.
I think
But
everyone, yeah.
yeah, so when I went on The Bachelorette, I then ended up getting broken up with by one of my top 2 and top 3. And it was what people don't know, and like what viewers witnessed it as like, oh my God, she was all in and then he dumped, and now she's just taking her second choice. And that was really disheartening, and it carried on for years of people giving me these negative comments, and their feelings towards me choosing Chris. And it was so disheartening, but I've learned to, you know, like God's decision and God's right path for me doesn't always make sense to the world, you know. And that's truly like what faith is. Like, you're believing in something that most people just logically can't grasp. And that's also when he was working in my life during that time, and you know, really showing me Chris as my husband and like what I had been praying for. um a lot of people couldn't see that that's like, this was like God's divine timing, and everything that happened prior to accepting a proposal to Chris had to happen in my life in order for me to like give up bad dating habits, and also just almost ridding me of those patterns and of those thoughts, and starting fresh and starting new. But the negativity was really wearing on me, because I'm sensitive. And when it's also hard when someone, like, I don't care if you talk about my appearance or what, but it was like they were hitting my soul with, you know, just like negativity. And It was really difficult, but luckily Chris is such a confident and secure and steadfast man. And, we were really able to he was able to just be my rock and help me through. And it's hard, I knew it was all God, and I just had to trust in that.
Yeah. Nobody likes to be attacked, and especially when it's like you said, it's not like bad bangs or that's a rough haircut or why did she choose that dress, when it's like the core of who you are and you feel misunderstood.
Yes,
Feeling misunderstood is one of the toughest things to feel.
Yeah, and I felt like maybe my whole life I always felt misunderstood in a sense. So then when you go on a show and I felt like, oh, this is like my moment to like feel validated and affirmed, and it wasn't. That's also was hard because because your expectations aren't always what God wants in your life, or actually what you need, I think.
Right. What the process he knows you need is not necessarily the process you want to walk through.
Yeah. Of course he wanted me to have he wants us all to have that fairy tale, but
sure.
But you have to go through hard things to get there. And I just didn't realize that I needed to have it aired, on national television.
On for everyone to see. I relate to that a lot. I feel like on a way smaller scale in our life, it's always on display. Our marriage is on display. Our parenting is on display. And there's just a lot of moments where I'd really rather have done that discipline thing behind the scenes. Did everyone really have to watch, my very tired 2-year-old kick over the poinsettias on Christmas Eve at a church that we were guests at? Like, I would have preferred that not happen in public, but and then you're on your toes and it's for everyone to watch. You figure out what to do. So there's not a whole bunch of grace and love when you're learning on your feet like that and in public. But do you feel like now there's so many things I want to talk about in that, because there's so much, but and like being misunderstood, all of those things are such identity things, right? And they're things that when we're just kind of like you talked about, like, I think I'm a Christian, but there's not that intimacy. It's more of a formal relationship, right? It's almost more of like I'm trying to do good. I'm trying to do this thing, right? But you're not actually like exposing your whole heart and going, I want to be identified by your daughter, and I want that to be what roots me and what my foundation is, and where my insecurity meets your security, and then like almost displaces my insecurity because I know that I'm yours and that you get me, so not everyone else has to get me.
And it takes years though. I mean, for me personally, it has taken probably a whole decade to get there, because I don't think I ever had an identity of my own. It was always put forth by others' opinions. Like growing up, being teased by my brother, and like just being a very sensitive person in general, and like a sensitive child, I would take on like what I think people perceived of me. And talk about going through high school with that. You definitely don't know who you are in high school, but like, I was finding my identity in validation, and like, that's why I think I constantly would seek it, because I'm feeling a void. I think that's what it is. Like, we all have a void, whatever that might be. Maybe that's like a relationship or, intimacy, but for me, it was definitely validation. And I kept trying to find my identity in other people and what they thought of me. And then on a, larger scale, once I got on the show, then it really, I think, took form in the sense of like, I think maybe it just heightened like my senses to it, of like, wow, like, why am I seeking, like, why do I need to be liked? Why do I need to be a favorite of someone's? Like, that's not, and that was 6 years ago. And I would say not even up until like motherhood, did I finally, then you get to motherhood, and that's a whole other story, because you find your identity within your kids. And I would say it's only been within the last 2 years where I'm like, I am finding, like, I am who I am because you created me to be this way. And what you think about me, God, is way more important than what these people on the internet think about me.
Yes. Do you talk to yourself a lot? Like, how do you pivot off of the thoughts of insecurity and needing validation? Because you're right, some of those things are just like we're made to feel like that. God created us that way, and so there's this really fine balance between knowing when you're crossing that line out of I want to be loved by my husband and I need a hug and I need this moment, and into like, wow, I'm very insecure right now, I've really crossed into this like unhealthy place.
I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly what works for me because, I mean, like we're women, we have hormones, and every day is so different. Whether I'm tired from a sleepless night from the kiddos, or I think it all takes into, or if it's just a season where you really have to work on the connecting with your husband, or but yeah, as I mentioned, I feel like that void I'm always trying to fill is validation, and that's the thing that will be my insecurity within, probably mostly within marriage, because I'm seeking validation from like my spouse. I think I don't know, even in motherhood, because when I first became a mother to Asher, I had a hard time because I'm so independent. I'm so driven to like, do things and build a business and be creative. And so I was having a hard time finding my identity in who I was instead of just a mother. And I was also having a hard time finding my identity in like being a wife, because I just felt like I was a mother, And it took months, probably like a year to really stop seeking, or like to realize like where my identity is coming from. And during that time, I think is when I was realizing I care, like my identity is coming from other people. Like obviously it was happening right after the show, but I think I was just so busy and wrapped up in it that I wasn't focusing on it. I was just letting it happen. But becoming a mom, I had it gave me more downtime and more time to think about things, as I'm nursing or whatnot. And I think that's when I started realizing like, I'm doing all these projects. I'm saying yes to everything, and I'm keeping myself busy to please other people, but I'm not being blessed by like all of these things I was doing. And so I realized I needed to stop saying yes to everything and start saying yes to, just the best yeses, and really to God yeses. Like, God, do you want this for me? Or am I doing it on my own will? And the moment I started focusing on his path for me is when I started to realize and see things of like finding my identity in him. And obviously a lot of songs like, worship, I feel like helped me because the songs spoke to me, like just all of the songs of identity and finding yourself in him. And I think when I was feeling the Spirit work in me during those songs is when I also was like, wow, okay, this is something I need to work on.
I know, it's crazy to me because on a Sunday, when we all were going to church and getting to go to church together, there is something about gathering together and feeling Holy Spirit sort of literally alleviate the pressure on your shoulders as you give him access, obviously. And just things that are heavy outside of his presence don't feel heavy in his presence. But then we find ourselves in quarantine and just home life, like you said, like nursing a baby and the real life. Sunday feels great and it usually lasts me till the end of the day. But then on Wednesday or something, sometimes Monday morning.
You're like Monday morning.
Like, okay, am I making this a priority? Like, am I giving my yes to this in my downtime, in my real lifetime? Is my internal life like dictating my external life, or the other way around? Or is it more like I'm still seeking that validation? Oh yeah, and I should pray and I should da da da? Or is it more like, no, this is like, I'm coming from this place to inform my exterior. So it all starts to line up a little bit more. But man, that has been something, I don't know if you feel that, but I've had to, especially during quarantine and stuff, just go, I need my relationship to be my relationship. I don't want to have to rely on others. And right now in this season, we're really knowing, like you said, I think you said before the Bachelorette, you knew you had struggles in maybe validation, but then you got on the show. And it's like sometimes when we're under pressure, right, is when those interior troubles and things that have been weighing there, but we haven't dealt with them. We've been able to gloss over them.
Yeah, we just keep ourselves busy.
Yeah, you just keep yourself busy, and then all of a sudden it's so exposed. And I feel like that's what quarantine's also been, and becoming a mom for me too. Felt like everything that I already was multiplied. And in the crazy mornings of nursing or middle of the night when we're already, like you said, hormonal and stuff, like everything that was already there was times 10.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's, as new moms, if new moms are listening, I think in hindsight too, I wish I knew that that was a time to really, I mean, I did, I guess, then realize what I was feeling and then, decided to seek that more. But as a new mom, I think it's just go into it, like embrace it and really dig deep to what you might, because you do have a little more time, when you are nursing or the baby's sleeping, and really think about what, like the things, the troubles, because I feel like you are heightened after birth, after labor. You're tired, exhausted, and from that comes the deep insecurities, I think too. Like when I'm tired, it all just erupts.
That's such a real thing. Like you just can't survive when you're tired. It's really
no.
So yeah, you guys got married, and I'm sure there was a bit of like deconstruction of the show together, right? As you're starting a legit relationship, like not a show relationship. I don't mean to minimize it, but
no, that makes sense.
Different coming off the show and going, okay, now we're going to build a life.
Yeah, it's different because Chris and I feel like we really knew each other from the show, because I always tell everyone this about the show, that it actually works because you have no distractions. So you don't have books, you don't have TV, you don't have your phone. And so you actually are like focusing on the relationships. You're focusing on the person. Yeah. And so, and it's a process that allows you to ask really deep personal questions like the first night. So you're almost, granted this access to someone's life that you normally wouldn't if you met on the street or met, somewhere else. So I would say that's why it works. So like by the time Chris proposed, we already knew that I would move to Seattle. We already knew that like what type of life we would build or at least, want to build for ourselves. Wow. And so, yeah, which is important. You're getting engaged. If you decide to get engaged, you're not forced to either on the show. I chose to say yes. And I don't know, it's just, we really do talk about a lot more than what's shown, because they want to show just drama and stuff. But
right. They have choice as to what they want to air. But
yeah. But so a life outside of the show, I guess it was just a little different because I'm like a little more reserved at that time, and having all eyes on me and all these pressures and everyone just, just watching our every step or our every word. And then on top of all the negativity that I was getting from the choice I made because of what people perceived. And it was really difficult for me. Chris went right back into, his work life, and he's just naturally, he compartmentalizes really well. Like, I don't think I've ever met anyone who can compartmentalize. And he says that's because of, he played minor league baseball. And so they were trained to compartmentalize like the different games and the different thing. So, but that helped him in this, and it helped him to be a rock for me because he didn't care at all about anything. He was like, he didn't care about like what happened on the show. He doesn't care that all he cared about that was that we were together and, you know, we were growing in our relationship. So he didn't allow any negativity to bother him. And that was like huge for me and huge for us, because I was so like up and down emotionally with everything. And yeah, he was a rock for me.
That's so good.
Yeah.
What would you say to the single girl who's like, oh, I'm so impatient, like I wanna find my person, and yeah, when is my time gonna come? Like, what would you want to say to that person?
You know what? There's so many things. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but when I was in that time of seeking, and when I was like, God, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to find my man. I'm ready to get married. And
Yeah.
I learned from my previous relationships, and I think he almost just gave it into me. Like, the Spirit just helped me learn to pray this prayer rather than what I was praying for. And it was to stop asking for the man, but to start praying for my future husband's heart to be ready. Because I had dated too many guys the guys that I wanted to date, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were definitely emotionally, you know, not ready.
Yeah.
And I would
That's
seek these relationships, but I was the one that was pursuing and needing and thinking like, oh, love is supposed to be hard. Like it's supposed to keep me on my toes. And then when I started praying, you know, like just prepare his heart, it was just like, it was almost like I knew it was going to happen. I didn't know when, and I didn't know where, and I didn't know why. But I think when you're praying a prayer like that, I don't know, it's preparing you for meeting the guy as well.
That's good. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so
It's like, it's full of faith, but it's also very surrendered.
yeah, you're giving up. Well, also you have to check your, you know, your list of standards, because too often we get too caught up in those and appearance, and he needs to do this and do that, when really like God knows what we need, not what we want.
Yeah.
Because I was always dating and seeking like what I thought I wanted, but in hindsight, like it was everything I didn't need. And so on the show, I was dumped by someone who was perceived to be the top guy. And I say perceived because I was still all in with Chris. So it's really frustrating when the way it was shown, but that's life and whatever. But he needed to do that. He needed to leave and do that. And I needed to go through that, because it was he was representing all of my past baggage and all of my past dating patterns and dating, habits. And again, God was shedding me of that bad fruit and those bad thoughts and those bad patterns that I was and of what I was seeking before the show. It's like I was seeking men who weren't available, but it just shed more light onto Chris, and he was like the steadfast, confident, his heart was ready. And that's what I had been praying for. I was praying for someone to, be ready and be all in and to like pursue me. And that's exactly what he was for me. And it's just, it was very difficult on the Bachelorette, because spiritually and emotionally and physically, I was just completely drained. So that's another thing that is an element that a lot of people don't see too, is that you're just completely like drained. So even thinking logically is hard to do, let alone walking by faith. Like, it's very difficult to navigate.
Oh man, I can't even imagine. But I think that you're right. Some of what you're saying just sounds like, because sometimes people really want the step-by-step, like, how did you overcome this? How did that work out for you? How did you find your husband? How da 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 da? But you're really just saying, like, you have to walk it out.
Absolutely.
You have to walk it out. And I think that God allows, like, why does God allow me to go through this? Why did God allow me to go through this? Probably because he loves you. So,
I
right?
know.
Like, it's sometimes we don't know by hearing, we know by doing, and we just have to walk it out with him. And I think that you did that even though it sounds like it was really hard.
It was really hard. Mhm.
But that's beautiful that you kept doing it. And it sounds like you still are, like, just going, here I am
Yeah.
with my insecurities, with my needed validation. Here I am. And
Yeah.
you keep showing up and you keep walking it out.
Yeah. And I keep praying about it too. I think,
Mm,
we just think like, oh, it's just who I am. It's just how I'm going to be. But I've had to pray for so many things that have taken years and years. So even being bold with my faith, like
yeah.
talking about it, sharing it, that has taken so many years. And I think we have to be reminded that when we see someone who's married or has kids or has something that you want, you have to be reminded that they lived a life too. And they probably had to go through the trenches and go through the struggles. And, like they didn't just one day, like everything just worked out perfectly. I mean, maybe for some people, but for the majority, God is doing a work in us in order to you know, to really build his kingdom. And I think we just have to be receptive to it and also willing to go through those struggles and not just think everything is rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I
Totally.
think just embrace. Oh, that sounds terrible to say embrace the struggle, but I do think you have to embrace it. Like, because instead of just going through it, oh my gosh, this is making me think about like labor for some reason.
Yeah.
Because with my first, I did unmedicated birth, so I got to experience all of it. And with
Same.
my first, I tell everyone that all I did was I endured the pain, and it made it very, very difficult for me. So, things were just more difficult for the first. But with the second, I embraced the contractions and I was intentional and I was present. And it was a very lovely experience. And I was present throughout the entire thing. And I'm using this as an analogy because I think it pertains to our faith walk too, is that when we're just trying to endure the struggle, we're not really getting anywhere. And it's going to be harder for us. But if we can embrace, and I maybe not even struggle, but whatever circumstance you're in, just embrace it and be present each and every day with it. Because if you lean into it, you're leaning into God. And if you're leaning into God, then maybe he will be able to show you the path to take. But if we're
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
if we're just trying to endure it, we're just going about our day, just enduring this pain and not really surrendering it to him.
You're right. Cause there's always a gift, like even in
Yeah.
childbirth, obviously, but
Yeah, obviously.
at the end, just to bring it back to that, and I agree, like my prayer changed after a whole bunch of really tough circumstances that, like you said, I was just enduring. I wasn't really leaning in. God really helped me change my prayer to like, can you help me, God, to see your perspective on my situation?
I love that.
Can you really help me see what you see? Because if I can see your perspective, then that's going to be all that I need to know that, like, you only have good for me. And, like,
Yeah.
and just to sort of, when I feel stuck, to know that he's still moving the puzzle pieces of my life into place, then I don't feel so stuck anymore, you know?
Yeah, and also I feel like a lot of times he's trying to show us, and maybe we're just not getting it. Like for instance, when I was trying to grow I mean, my business is only like 3 years old, and when I was in the beginning of trying to grow it, I was just going about it my own way and my own will, and going like choosing different things the way I felt it needed to go.
Mm.
And I would, constantly, and it wasn't doing well. And, or I guess my expectation was a little higher, but I would keep getting these every time I opened my Bible, it was like the same message, the same verse, the same this. And it was all about trusting his will, trusting his will.
Mm.
But I was confused because I'm like, I am trusting your will, because in my like present day, like in the moment, I thought I was. Even though like in hindsight, I'm like, no, I was going about it my own way,
Mm.
choosing my own path and not leaning into where he wanted me to go. Like I had to start thinking about like, oh, that big decision I made for my business, did I ask him about it or did I just
Huh.
decide to do it?
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, this took like probably a whole like 8 months to a year but I had to pray I had to be like, God, you're showing me this and I feel like I'm walking in your will. So can you please show me like what I'm not doing right? Because it was, when I was in the moment, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see where I was going wrong. And I think there are moments in that where we're like, we think we're just going about our day the way he wants us to, but we sometimes just have to check ourselves.
No, that's good. I think this brings us right back around to where we started with intentionality, right? And I
Absolutely.
remember we talked about this on your podcast too,
Yeah.
just about how do you be present, or sorry, how do you be purposeful in life, which is
Yeah.
the podcast is really focused around that.
Yeah.
Just our hearts. And I feel like when I'm present, I'm so much more purposeful. And so I've found it probably my biggest challenge in quarantine is how to be intentional with my time, because on the road, I am like the roles are very clearly defined. I'm mom until sound check. So
Oh,
Chris
yeah.
drives and like then he crashes and gets to sleep for a bit. I take the kids on an adventure. We are just hanging, no other distractions from the time they wake up till 3. And then at 3, I have to go sound check and I switch into band mode and work mode and career and different career.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
And then a caregiver comes and hangs with the kids, and that's the routine. So my days are very evenly split in half with mom and artist. So I realized during quarantine, it was almost easier on the road than at
Mm-hmm.
home to really understand where my intentions were and why I was struggling at home so much, because it was all colliding into one. And I think people had a misconception of us, like, how do you do life on the road with your
Mm-hmm.
kids and your husband? You're like, yeah, it does sound nuts, but after years of doing it, we've really worked it
Yeah.
to a point where we know our roles and our intentions within those roles and what we do when. At home, it was more of a jumbled mess. Like
Yeah.
childcare, Chris and I are both home, both
Oh
trying
my
to get
gosh.
stuff done. And honestly, it's taken me until, if I'm being really honest, until the last 2 weeks to really, like you said, the first week was awesome because it just felt like party time at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'd never been home. I have never been home off the road this long ever in my whole life. Like even when I went
Wow.
back on the road quick. So it exposed, like you said, just all of those things that were already there. It's like I didn't stop striving just because I wasn't playing shows,
Yeah.
which I thought it
Absolutely.
would just go away because I'm a hard worker like you. I'm super motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, oh man, well, I'm not playing shows, so I won't be striving. I'll be resting. I'll just be chill. No, those parts still bubble up, and I still find myself busy and out of time in quarantine. So it's been very
Safe.
feeling. Yeah, like God's really been like, wow, see that thing you just did there? Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be really honest. When you went online right then, was that because that I prompted you to do that, or was that because you just needed a bit of clapping? You needed a bit of validation in that moment, or you wanted
It's
more likes on something, or was that actually because
true.
I really said, Joe, do you need this is on your heart? I put that on your heart. Go talk about it.
Oh,
Ooh,
that is conviction for
yeah.
sure. But
Oh,
I mean, it's something even I have had to struggle with, and I think I've finally gotten to a point because I finally have gotten to a point where I'm not seeking other people's likes and follows because I finally have found my identity in him.
that's good.
Yeah, but girl, that took so long. So for the past 6 years, 7 years, I don't know what year it is. Um,
What is time right now?
yeah, but I mean, I think that's something everyone struggles with. It doesn't have to be just because you have a platform. It's like if you have one follower, you have a platform. So you are you know, oh, that's so
Oh,
good. But
right.
I can't imagine how quarantine's been for you because that is so different.
It is different, but I feel like God, just like you said, like it sounds like the Bachelorette was a season of pruning for you and
Mm-hmm.
really giving God full access to places, like you said, that you wanted to in your hard
Yeah.
parts when you were single or when you were in relationships that weren't prime for you.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't really fully giving him access to those parts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it's
No.
deeper with Bachelorette and just deeper, deeper, deeper. And I feel like every once in a while he brings us back around to something that allows us to be really pruned again and just purified again, and like you said, like a challenge and a struggle that we have the choice. Okay, I've been through a few struggles with you, God.
Mm-hmm.
We've been through some storms together. now I get to see if, like what you said, it took 6 years, but that's beautiful that you're in a different place than you were 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's like, if I don't ask God, like you said, okay, I'm leaning into this, God, can you teach me? He brings me back around to it again.
Absolutely. It's like a merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Like you can't get, so I guess if going back to dating too, like if you're like, why can't I just meet the one? Maybe you're on a merry-go-round. Like maybe he's trying to show you what you need to work on, but then you just start passing it over, and then he's like, oh, and then it comes back, and or like, yeah, you're not working on it. You're not working on it. You get in a relationship. Of course, it's the bad one that he doesn't want for you. And then they break up, and then, oh, he wants you to work on it again. And then it's like,
Yeah. You're totally right, because there's like steps to it, right? Steps
yeah,
to change. It's like, first it's just handing over your heart and surrendering and giving him access. But then, like you said, it's not just like humdrum. Then it's like, oh wow, I need to pray. Oh wow, I need to exercise my faith muscle. Oh wow,
yeah,
faith isn't just hearing, it's doing. So
yes,
even if I just have mustard seed faith, I want to start a business. I want to be a mom. I want a relationship. It's aligning that surrendered heart with obedience and the steps.
yes. I think another thing that people need to notice too and realize, like, yes, I talk about faith, and I talk about these things that have happened because of faith, but I wasn't just sitting waiting for it.
Right.
Like,
No.
you do have to act. So even when I was praying that prayer of like, okay, like I'm I'm trying to meet the right guy, Lord, I'll start praying for his prayer. I wasn't just sitting around like not dating. I was still actively dating. And in fact, I told myself I am going to say yes to more men, that because I was just quick to like, I was just quick to be like, oh, I'm not attracted, like whatever.
Right.
Because that was my problem. I think, I'm first attracted, and then I just think like, oh my God, lust is love, when really it wasn't. And
Mm.
so you have to be active, like taking steps towards whatever it is you want. You can't just be like, oh, I want my dream to happen. I want this business. I want this, life. It's not just going to show up the next day. Like, what are you going to do to prove to God that you're ready?
Hmm. Totally. I guess that's why it's like a partnership. Like, God has full power, full reign and authority. He could do stuff without us, but that's not how he set it up.
No,
Like, he wants to partner with us.
totally.
So you're totally right. Like, even that just simple, my verse of the day has consistently been this week, seek and find. And it's like,
Oh,
wow, you're always
yeah,
right there, but if I'm not seeking, it's a lot harder to find you.
totally.
Not that you can't overwhelm me with a miracle, but I think most of the time it's more when I'm pursuing him that I'm able
Hmm.
to feel that pursuit back and that step.
Yeah, totally. When I was first getting back into my faith journey, this is another like analogy, but I was in a relationship, and I've come to find out he was agnostic and didn't really believe in God, but was acting supportive. And so he would spend all this time practicing hockey or whatever activity that he was doing. And I was in my mind, I'm like, okay, the more you practice something, the better you get. So the more I was praying, the more I was going to church, the more I was doing this, I was getting stronger in my faith. And I
Mhm.
think that's something we have to be reminded of. Like,
Wow.
we have to continue to work that muscle, the faith muscle, and we have to continue to grow on it. Otherwise, we do become stagnant, and we become complacent, and we become just thinking like, yeah, I'm a Christian, but are you a lukewarm one? Like, are you gonna be bold and courageous and continue to grow? And
Mm.
I think that's something even I have had to, like, there's seasons of life, obviously, but I've had to be reminded too, like, I have to keep practicing like my faith,
Right. No,
and
that's
that's taking steps of faith. Like, that decision seems very hard, but I'm going to pray about it. And if I feel led to do it, then I'm going to have to jump and do it.
right. Even if you're no longer using I'm going to do this because it feels good or it's easy. It's like, no, I think I have to do this because if I really do want to grow in my faith, there's going to be things that feel beyond me because they are.
Absolutely.
You just are. And that's so scary before you take a step and then so exhilarating on the other side of the step.
right?
Absolutely.
Like just like
Yeah.
motherhood, like goodness sakes, it's not like there's any big, like, okay, you're a mom and now like you just know it all. It's like, no, they grow slowly, you grow
Oh
slowly
my
with
gosh.
them as a mom. Thank the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, different stages. I mean, you could also use I'm so visual that I just come up with all these different metaphors. But I don't know.
Love it.
But also like just how we want to help our children grow, like God wants to help us grow. So we have to think about that in those stages too. Like if we're new Christians, of course we're going to be like babies and toddlers and we're going to need a little help, you know?
Mhm.
So you got to be willing to accept help or
Yeah.
seek counsel, seek advice. And then as you grow and grow, like he wants to, help you be better at that skill that,
Yeah.
you're so good at, or the talent that he gave you. He wants to grow that. And then I don't know, I think we have to be reminded that he's also a father,
Right.
and wants to see his children do good. He's there for us in every up and down, and just as we are for our children, if way more, because we're human, we're fickle. So he's not.
I love that. Yeah, he's a king, but he's also a father. And
Yeah,
that's beautiful when you become a parent. I feel like I got such a different perspective on the father's heart by becoming a mom. But
absolutely.
as a mom, how does the validation thing play out?
Um, Honestly, I would say a lot of the insecurity I had before has left a little bit. And I think that is because my boys have been a blessing in that.
Mm,
Because I also feel like God knows your heart. He knows the desires of your heart, and He knows that that's something I struggle with.
sure.
So I think He had, though both of my boys have just been gifts of that. So I think a lot of my insecurity coming from needing that validation from Chris, obviously it still lingers, and that's just part of my past that I still, that's just my struggle.
Yeah, sure.
And um and he knows that, but obviously, that's just you always have to work on. But I would say the more I lean into God, and when I do feel those feelings creep up, I try to remind myself of where I'm finding my identity. So I'm not gonna lie, like when I was pregnant with my first, it was hard. I would say I had a very hard time. I was super emotional just with pregnancy. And then we both were just super busy with work. He was super busy with work and all of those different things you have to talk about, about becoming parents. And it was just a lot. And I think I was constantly seeking the validation from like a physical point too, because I'm growing this baby. I feel weird. I don't feel like myself. My body's changing. And I'm a person, I need words of affirmation. So, and that's not, his strength because we love differently. That could be a whole other
Right.
podcast because
Oh,
we
yeah.
love differently and we have to understand what the other person, how they love.
Right.
But sometimes it's hard to get that because I'm like, why don't you just see like showing love is validation? But that's not how he needs love. So it's,
And because he doesn't need it that way, he doesn't think to give it that way.
yeah. And so I really struggled. But then once Asher was born, it was almost just a release of like, wow, like, I don't know. I didn't really need it. And I felt stronger in my body.
Mm,
After the second, man, I felt incredible in my new shape because I'm like, look what I did and look what God has blessed me
right.
with. And I
Mhm.
am going to be proud of who I am. And, but I was getting to, when I do feel those little days of like insecurity or those days where I'm just like really needing validation, um, there was like a moment, probably like a week or so. I think it's when I just had Xander too. So you're really feeling just different.
Yeah.
And I just took Post-its and started writing words of affirmation for myself. And
Good.
I put those Post-its on my mirror and I took them down like months ago because I was like, I don't need these because I'm finding my identity
Wow.
in Christ. And I didn't even see myself looking at them, but I did need them for that moment. I needed to look in the mirror and be like, I put like strong, worthy, beautiful, loved, because affirmation and validation doesn't have to be like physically, like
Right.
it's like you're seeking validation for like your work or being a mother or
Yeah.
You are a kind person. You are beautiful. Or, I don't know. There's just so many words that people need in their life. And I think we talked about it too before, but like how even just lifting up women and stuff, like it's important to really share what you feel about someone, because
Yeah.
you
Totally.
don't know what, you can't assume that they get the love that they need. You can't assume that. So if you feel like, oh wow, that girl's shirt is really cute, like tell her,
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely. Well, I love it. I mean, we could talk
I know.
for hours and hours, and I feel like there's tons that we didn't even get to, but I feel
I
like
know.
what I am really taking away is just that you've really gotten more and more comfortable in your own skin, and just like, it's so encouraging, I think, to every woman listening, and guy, but most of the women listening, to go, yeah, like just to be who you are, and to kind of recognize that, like, yeah, the things that we kind of, the natural negative roads we sometimes head down, that's okay. But to recognize it and just go, man, I'm not living to please or satisfy or get a gold star from everybody
Yeah.
else. I'm just really going to live kind of like to the beat of my own drum, and like
Yeah.
finding that freedom does take time, but
So much freedom.
you seem really free in, like, yeah, I'm a mom and I'm a
Oh,
wife, and I am still the same girl I was before I was all those things. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's beautiful.
oh,
A lot of
well,
freedom in not seeking that validation and affirmation from someone else's approval, but knowing you're so
yeah.
fully approved.
Yeah, and not putting your worth in their words.
Yeah.
Like what people think or say about you, like don't put your worth in that, really seek what God wants. I mean, honestly, I have to do that every day. So
Um,
it's a path we take and a choice we make each day.
yeah, I think that's beautiful though. I think there's something for everybody. Like if you're in a single season, there's so many takeaways. If you're mom, there's so many takeaways. If you're a newlywed or you're engaged, there's takeaways. Like I think you beautifully showed us different stages of your journey and who you were and who you are becoming.
Oh, thank you so much, Jody.
People need to listen to your podcast. So tell
Oh,
everybody
yes.
all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just started a podcast, faith-based podcast, Heart of Purpose podcast, where just, really seeking and encouraging a life of purpose every day. And it's been wonderful. So you can find that on all of the platforms that podcasts are,
Yeah.
or on my website, DesireeSiegfried.com.
And I know I follow you on IG, but tell everyone your Instagram handle.
Yes. On IG, you can follow me at Desiree Siegfried. Or if you love weddings and wedding dresses, you can follow me over at Desiree Hartsock, which is all of my bridal stuff.
I love that. That was really fun to check out. I was like, I wish I needed a dress.
Hey, if you ever need a custom dress, I am your girl.
That is so cool. To anyone
Yes.
listening, go check it out. I love it.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing all the different parts of your life with us.
yes. Thanks so much for having me. I love chatting with you.
You too. Have an awesome day.
Thanks.